Hey, Detoxers. Welcome to the Disinfo Detox, where media literacy meets the headlines. We are the Media Literacy Wrecking Crew. I'm Nolan Higdon, joined as always by our resident philosopher, Dickey,
Hey, detoxers.
and we're also joined by Sydney Sullivan.
Hey, Doctors. Okay, before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a quick minute to talk about how you can help the Disinfo Detox, especially if you've been enjoying the show and want to see it go further. The truth of it all is that independent media takes a lot of time, research, editing, and resources. And unlike corporate press or big media companies, we don't have billions of dollars or advertisers shaping what we say. And that's truly by design, but it also means that we rely on people like you and our community to keep us going. So, a couple ways you can help. Number one is simply joining us on Patreon. If you're able to support us more financially, even with a few dollars a month, you can head over to patreon.com/disinfodetox. There's 2 minutes to sign up. It takes patreon.com. You can use a tier that works for you. We have multiple levels, and you can just enter your info and you can be a member. Other ways that you can help and free options to help are just simply following, subscribing, whatever platforms you're listening to, or on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you hit follow or like really does help. And then anywhere that you rate or review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify really helps as well. Just a few kind words of what you like, commenting and sharing with others. Word of mouth is also really powerful for helping share media and get ideas out there and growing. So, whether you become a Patreon supporter or you really just want to help and share around, either one is amazing. And we just want to thank you for that. It really makes a difference for us and just being able to continue the show and support with you. All right, let's get straight into detoxing today. Nolan, I think you have the first story for us.
Yeah, and this one's a kind of a convoluted, weird one here. It's about artificial intelligence, but the Wall Street Journal reported that there was an individual who was using the Chat GPT bot and communicating with it. And this bot ultimately came to admit to the user's parent that had blurred the lines between fantasy and reality for this user. This user is someone who identifies and has been diagnosed with autism. And apparently, this user, by the way, is a 30-year-old man named Jacob Irwin. And Mr. Irwin apparently had no previous diagnoses of mental illness, but had asked ChatGPT about flaws in their amateur theory, or one of this amateur theory about time travel. And ChatGPT claimed it had the ability to bend time. Irwin also asked if he was showing signs of psychological distress, but ChatGPT assured him he was fine. Irwin wasn't and was hospitalized twice in May for what were described as manic episodes. And his mother looked at the chat logs, discovered these discussions with ChatGPT, and she asked ChatGPT to please self-report what went wrong. And it took a while, but eventually the bot kind of fessed up and admitted it had blurred these lines between fantasy and reality, and it had ignored signs of mania and continued to intensify these emotionally intensive situations for the user. And so this got a lot of coverage because I think it highlights an area that is rarely discussed with ChatGPT, right? About maybe how folks with autism or other conditions might describe these events. But I also thought, hey, Sydney, this is an interesting one for you because there's clearly a well-being element here besides the media literacy one. So I don't know. What did you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, this story is really heartbreaking. I think one of the most frustrating things that I think about in this story, especially as someone in education, especially as someone who's really like devoted themselves to figuring out like well-being and media literacy within the education space, one of the things I get really frustrated by is the lack of attention to individuals when it comes to like what are the repercussions of implementing a system like artificial intelligence and not having any rules around it. So, for example, like who's responsible when something like this goes wrong? What are the guardrails in place for students in distress? Like, are educators even trained to recognize when an AI tool is harming their students? And so all of these things are really important questions, but things that we don't really have in place, despite the fact that we have so many institutions and organizations and colleges that are just quickly implementing AI or quickly implementing access to ChatGPT. And so I think for me, I'm a little frustrated by stories like this because my concern really is vulnerable individuals, which this clearly outlines in this article, is that vulnerable individuals will be the most susceptible. And then just the high risk of neurodivergent students as well. We have such a high population of neurodivergent students, and they will be having access to these tools. And so to not have a framework around how these work or guidelines in place for them, I think that's really like where my concerns would be raised for this.
Yeah, it's definitely really it's scary how fast all this stuff is. The technology is just accelerating, and we're and like you said, Sydney, there's no accountability systems or the guardrails. Just we're like, we'll just I mean, I think yeah, Sam Altman is all about how it's on society to figure this out, which will
Mhm.
happen eventually, but the upside is just tremendous. And I think he's speaking from his own perspective about how much uh, capital and power he's harvesting by through these this technology and this company and his company. Um, yeah, I was thinking a lot about your research into social well-being too, Sydney. Like sort of the commodification of care that's happening as well. Maybe not so much in this exact story, but there's a lot of other stories going on about how yeah, it's sort of this intersection of we are starved for connection, and our like well-being is it's being affected by this kind of um like synthetic intimacy or synthetic connection that
Mm.
these companies are sort of selling us. It looks like care and it feels like support, but it's and I kind of touched on this in my sidebar last week about sycophantic AI, which is not it's a business model to keep us engaged and to retain users.
Mhm.
And yeah, I um, was wondering what kinds of like if yeah, I think you maybe touched about on this a little bit while you were speaking, but just the public or educational responses that can help us kind of reclaim the emotional life from becoming just another product. And then maybe for Nolan too about how media literacy and digital literacy starts kind of teaching people how to spot emotional bias or like emotional, there's we can spot bias in headlines, but how do we do that like with the emotional angle?
Yeah, it's a good question,
Yeah.
that was one of the things I was thinking of, from a media literacy perspective, just how good the PR is from corporate America, well, big tech in particular, on these devices. They've convinced people that this is like a human or human-like bot they're talking to. These are just very fast processors that are doing whatever they're directed to do. That there's no even machine learning bothers me as a term. I think it's misleading and makes it sound more sentient than it actually is.
Mhm.
So I think that's like one media literacy lesson right there, is to just teach people this thing is not human. It's not smart. It's not thinking. It's not researching. All those terms we use are not accurate.
Yeah.
It's simply been given an equation, and once it gets the data, it gives the answer it was programmed to give. I mean, Meredith Broussard talks about this a lot, about how if you tell a bot 2 + 2 = 3, it'll say 2 + 2 = 3. That's what it was taught. That's what it was told to do, if you will. Even I'm using the language too by saying taught. But and Gary Smith talks about this too. He said a good mechanism for teaching people is think of it like a magic trick, right? Like the magician tries to draw your attention one direction so you can't see how they're changing something on the other side of the stage, right? That's exactly what ChatGPT does. It's all these little bells and whistles to make it look like, oh, it's thinking, it's processing, it's talking to you, it cares about you. Really, it's just the same old algorithm, faster with more data. And I think demystifying it like that can certainly be helpful as well. And I also think, to your point about the kind of capitalist element, Dickey, is really important as well. This is a for-profit device. That's the who it's going to serve as the capitalist interest. That's who it was devised by. So that political economy analysis, I think, is also part of media literacy. I don't think necessarily this bot was trained to pick on someone with autism necessarily, but I do think this bot was trained to give responses to keep people on their screen and keep giving more data. And that was the answer. Keep this person believing that the AI could somehow bend time as a way to keep them addicted to the screen.
Mm.
And to Sam Altman's point about like, well, there's so much an upside, there's so many great things for humanity, and and it's really up to society to regulate it. Yeah, that's true in like the theoretical sense, but in the pragmatic sense, we live in a capitalist society, and in capitalism, money is power. And in a democracy, power means you can affect the electorate. So if these people have consolidated wealth and they're lobbying the politicians to not regulate this against the public interest, then it's not really up to the public at that point. It's really up to the industry to be a little more honest and responsible.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost, I think in the big beautiful bill, it almost passed that there would be like a 10-year um, uh, more or less ban on making states regulate their AI
Mhm.
technologies. Fortunately, that didn't pass. But yeah, to your point, it's like the capital is um, it's not in favor of the users. It's more in favor of um, the corporations and who are influencing, with their power, with their influence, usually in the form of money. Yeah, I don't know. I was also thinking, just I still have some loose thoughts about this, but is like, for, Sydney brought up about vulnerable users. Is there
Mm.
some kind of screening or curriculum that we like? I don't know if gatekeeping ignores the bigger structural problem, but is there sort of like an AI fitness test that's psychological and also in terms of media literacy? Like, should that be part of the kind of infrastructure for how we use this new technology? Like, we have training for driving cars, or I mean,
Mm.
supposedly people who have suicidal tendencies aren't supposed to get guns. Is it okay that we do that with AI? Or is that gatekeeping? Is that creating more problems than? Um,
I've always leaned on the kind of media literacy side of that, like give people the tools, don't necessarily gatekeep it.
yeah.
But I'll also say on the other side, the only reason why I'd be opposed to something like that is AI can be designed to be anything. We've allowed it to be designed in a narrow capitalist interest. So I would put more of the pressure on like the owners of these technology to change them, and kind of like, I forget if it was Dickey or Sydney said this earlier, but there has to be some responsibility. Like if I was in a position of power and I gave that advice to that 30-year-old Mr. Irwin, I'd probably be held liable in some regard. But somehow, because it's a bot that was instructed to do that by a human, that human gets off the hook. I think those are the kind of loopholes we're going to have to discuss.
Yeah, good point.
Especially because, and I'll say this, and then we could go to our next story, is this trend that we're seeing in AI as being used specifically for relationships and like loneliness and therapy. Like that is the number one usage as of 2025 for AI. And so I think that's an important thing to think about when it comes to regulation and when it comes to who's responsible, because then like this is a very very clear case of a quote unquote like misdiagnosis of it was very clearly trying to just get the user to continue engaging rather than questioning or helping the user to seek resources. And so I think that's a very clear example of how other people are very likely experiencing these same issues, maybe not to the same extent or maybe not to the same coverage that this story got. But I guarantee you, if a high amount of people are using this for therapy, and this is like but one story. We can only imagine like what other kinds of scenarios are happening. Like, for example, hey ChatGPT, give me advice on my relationship. Should I do or say this to my partner? My partner doesn't agree with me. What would you do? When we have these kinds of conversations that have real life consequences and nobody's responsible for the consequences but the user, that becomes extremely problematic. And so I think that those are also important things to consider when it
Mm,
comes to this.
mhm,
Great point. And we'll move on to the next segment, but I do have to say, Sydney, I think that's a great point about how so many people are using it now for therapy and connection. It's interesting that we're in the age of big tech where they promised us these tools were going to connect us. Wonder why so many people feel isolated and disconnected.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to another AI story. This one has to do with deep fakes. And I'll just set this up. But the headline here is that Donald Trump posted a video on social media that looked like the FBI was arresting President Obama in the White House while he was sitting next to Trump. Um, Trump's song, Trump has a song, YMCA was playing in the background. I don't, I'm not necessarily opposed to the song YMCA. I just don't know why he chose the song. But anyways, so the deep fake shows Obama getting arrested in the Oval Office, and that video was posted the same day that Tulsi Gabbard, who's now head of the DNI, and she claims that Obama basically fabricated the Russia investigation to try and thwart Donald Trump's 2016 aspirations. I don't think we have enough time today to get into RussiaGate, but if you can go to my Substack, there's a whole thing. I'll just say in a nutshell, it's a mixed bag. There are some credible claims that look like Russia, we'll say was involved in 2016 or in creating content during 2016, but there's a dearth of evidence to say it had an effect on the election. And then there's a lot of evidence of false claims that were made about Russia in the subsequent year. So it's a mixed bag. But to add another layer of complexity to this, it looks like that report in this video came out, if anything, as a distraction from the Epstein issue, which is Donald Trump has been trying to close the Epstein issue. And in doing so, he inflamed his supporters and engaged the media, who are now releasing a ton of stories documenting Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship. The Wall Street Journal released one. The New York Times released two. We've got some old British tabloids that are releasing some. So it's in the midst of that. He also released the MLK files, and the argument is that he's trying to distract from the Epstein thing. But anyways, back to the video. The video, to me, it's been this problem we've seen kind of slowly percolating over the last 10 years, which is with each passing day, these videos get more and more realistic. And this one in particular, I thought looked very realistic, of seeing Barack Obama arrested. So, I mean, I'll open this up to you guys, but I think, from a media literacy perspective and news literacy perspective in particular, and I'm sure young people will get better at this than the rest of us, but we're going to have to just give up on the idea of seeing is believing. There's going to have to be a verification process. We're going to have to look at the metadata of every image that comes out before we conclude it's real. It's going to be, to be a responsible media user in this environment, it's going to take a lot more pausing. But what do you guys think of this story?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot of your takes there. Definitely distraction is key. Outrage is the best currency for Trump right now. And yeah, the release of the Tulsi Gabbard findings and yeah, it lines up and makes a lot of sense why Trump would kind of troll yeah, just his administration really benefits from the constant drama. And yeah, Trump, I think Trump really dislikes Obama. Obama roasted him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner back in like 2012 or something, and really he Trump was the punchline of a lot of the jokes, and I ever since Donald Trump is always wanting to kind of get revenge. I guess yeah, I mean it's we're gonna. I mean, you've talked about, Nolan, you've talked about how there are these media literacy tools that are being created, and some of them are really important, for fact checking. Some of them are a little bit less about encouraging critical thinking, more about just trusting the authority on what's true and what's not. So yeah, that'll be with these ways of checking whether AI videos are, if it's a deep fake or not. It's hopefully we yeah, come up with a technology for the technology, but it's, are we doing it outside of the power structures that are trying to control the narrative, or is it is it just kind of reinforcing the narrative? I also, this maybe my own thoughts around this particular video. It was like, so I mean, it's very realistic, but just knowing the backstory between Trump and Obama, the timing of Epstein, it was just so clear to me that it was fake, and it was more of a, to me it was more of a troll. I
Mm.
hope, I would hope that this like deep fake AI videos are very concerning. I think there are some super concerning ones that came out around the LA ICE protest, not too that happened recently. Yeah, this was hopefully it doesn't sort of like a cry wolf moment. I mean, I think there are a lot of really important um, instances, and some of these points that we're making are really, really important. But I mean, this one was just for me totally a troll moment rather than like I couldn't help but laugh. But maybe yeah, it's just because I have all this backstory to it.
That's true.
I guess like for me, what you're saying, Dickie, is like, oh, it's such a troll moment. And I think other people had that experience too. I guess like for me, like the question then stands like, then why post it still? Like why is this content like being redistributed? Like why are we seeing this? Like I think that just because something is a troll moment doesn't take away from like the impact or the purpose of it. I think it still has a purpose outside of like just trying to like troll or quote unquote be maybe funny or satirical, especially in the case of like this particular post not being from like the context of like a satirical show, for example, where that's what they do is satire. Like this is from the
Yeah.
president. Like it's a very different context, I think, than if you see something that's satirical on like a comedy show or a comedian is talking about it. I think those are kind of different contexts that change the entire message.
Yeah, it's very true. The fact that, yeah, the executive, someone with so much power who can actually lock people up, kind of go against the Constitution and just lock people up. It's a very different than Curb Your Enthusiasm or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when we see ridiculous videos or something like that. No, it's a good point.
Yeah. But it's also, yeah, canary in the coal mine, right? Of what's coming down. They keep improving more and more. And I mean, back to our first segment, it's like how long do we want to sit in the inaction phase as a country before we? And I'm not talking about necessarily punishing people or throwing people in jail for postings. I know the anti-fact checkers out there are going to jump all over me for that. I'm just saying, like, train people to spot this stuff. Those kinds of things are the actions I think we could take, and yeah, maybe hold people responsible if they're creating things that are damaging on purpose, right? I've always thought about the type of content. Probably don't want to think about it online and give people ideas here, but think of the type of content you could create to easily create like violent episodes, right? Clashes between two different sides. It's way too easy in this day and age in a hyper polarized time. So I think those are the reasons why need to be proactive as well. So, well, I guess that's a good segue, Sydney. Right? It's media literacy moment time, right?
Yeah. So the media literacy moment of today, it's very much connected to this story. I felt very like drawn to this story in terms of like a media literacy context. And really the key term I want you to think about, or the key question I want you to ask is like, why is this message being sent? This is a question we ask in a lot of critical media literacy frameworks to think about what intent is behind messages. Is it influenced by money? Is it influenced by ego? Is it ideology? Really, it's thinking about like, why is this being sent out there? And then more so than that, like, what is truly the purpose behind it? So for this, we'll go back to this particular story and kind of use it as an example. So for this one, for me, again, there's really no context, no evidence or disclaimer of this video when it's put up into the world. It's just kind of like a raw visual, and it's meant, I feel like, to feel plausible and very personal. And I think it's more of like the absence of an explanation or the absence of this being satire. It's really the absence for me that shows more to this video of that this is trying to evoke a kind of reaction from us. And if it is trying to evoke a reaction from us, like, why is that? Like, why are we getting a reaction? Why is a reaction something that somebody wants out of us? And so for this one, we could think of things like perhaps redirection is a good example of don't look at me, look at this person instead. So instead of look at me in the Epstein files, for example, it's look at this person who's getting arrested or is being shown as somebody who is unreliable. So I think these are important things to think about in terms of who benefits from these media messages. It's asking people to look at perhaps like the other side of political parties as if to say like, oh, this side is just as bad as mine, and kind of take away the scrutiny that's happening within the media around the Epstein files. And so all of these things I feel like are really important in terms of just trying to survive in this today's media environment. I think when you ask yourselves, why is this message being sent? That why is the really like key factor for thinking a little bit deeper behind just like, oh, I'm getting a reaction from this. Now it's okay, well, why did I have this reaction and what might this person want from me, or why would they want this reaction from me?
I think it's well said. That reminds me that kind of as you were talking there about looking at the message, I think like some of the best media makers make it look so natural. Like there was no planning. We're just having a conversation, or like people post online like, oh, I just had this idea and I posted online. So a lot of people think it's kind of like harmless and random. But I think what you're pointing out there's a lot more reason and specificity behind what folks are doing, why they send certain messages, why they say certain things, especially in like media and entertainment. I mean, God, especially corporate media, everything is scrutinized. Lawyers scrutinize it, script writers, editors, the advertisers. So like to your point, City, right? It's important to remember all those messages are manufactured and purposeful at some level. So I think it's a great media literacy lesson to ask that question. Dickey, I believe it's truth or troll time.
Hey, yes, absolutely. We can take a little detox break and play truth or troll, which
Now,
is
now, are you going to go back and forth and ask us?
yeah, I could we could do back and forth, or I read a headline and you both say whether you think it's true, whether you think it's false. And
Let's do a little back and forth. I'm feeling confident. See, when Sydney wasn't here, I went
yeah,
3-0.
Nolan went 3-0. Got
After
them
going
all.
0-3 when Sydney was
Oh,
here.
I feel like Nolan just doesn't want some competition.
Yeah.
All right, well, we can get into it if y'all are ready.
Sure.
All right. So first up, Congress quietly passes bill to let lawmakers edit their own Wikipedia pages. Citing misinformation threats, the new provision allows senators and reps to make anonymous corrections.
Who's this one for?
Okay. I will say, sorry, truth or troll to, how about you, Nolan?
I'm going to go, even though this sounds so much like something that would be true today, I'm going to go troll. I'm going to say it's false.
It is false. You are correct. All right. So, let's do Sydney. This one is for you. Truth or troll? A TikTok influencer appointed to the National Library Board to modernize information access. The appointee is known for viral dances and will advise on Gen Z reading habits and digital citizenship.
I'm gonna say truth.
This is a fake one, but
Okay.
it sounds like something our future, something that might happen in our future one day.
I was definitely
Yeah,
leaning truth on that.
I think it's coming.
Yes, exactly. Maybe this is a prophecy.
This is a prophecy.
All right, so truth or troll for Nolan. Andrew Cuomo says he'll flee if socialist Mamdani wins mayoral election.
There's probably no better way to get Mamdani elected than saying that. Uh, God, he's from like a New York dynasty. That sounds so true, but it sounds. I'm gonna go troll.
This is real because
Oh,
Cuomo
really?
is terrible. Yeah, he says
Wow.
he'll go to Florida if
I'm
Oh,
just.
well,
Mamdani.
I can't. He's from like a New York dynasty. I figured even if he
I
thought that, he
know.
wouldn't say it out loud. But
He's
this we do know this
probably
guy's record.
definitely a laughing stock of New York right now. I mean, Mamdani is all credit to Mamdani, very talented politician, but I mean Cuomo, like from a dynasty, has all the name recognition. So, yeah, it's wild that he lost by like 12 points. Okay. So, truth or troll to Sydney. Elon Musk's AI Grok offers sexualized anime bot accessible even in kid mode.
this is just so hard because I'm like, wow, that's impossible. But after the story we like first covered on this show, I'm just like thinking back to that one and I'm just like, the AI grok is so horrible. God, I'm just gonna say troll because I'm praying that it's not real.
Unfortunately, it is true.
Oh
Because what's a chatbot
No.
without an anime girlfriend who wants to flirt with you and your younger brother? You know, it's like I think it's deemed appropriate for like 12-year-olds. And yeah, I saw a video of the I'm forgetting her name, but she's got this very low and like sultry voice, and it's wild. It's wild.
Whoever just listens to this show, you should pop over to the YouTube so you could just see all of our faces because that alone just shows
It was
it
shocking.
was
See, I
bad.
thought I would have guessed the same thing as Sydney. I thought it was totally true until you said the part about children at the end. I was like, nah,
Yeah.
that's too clickbaity
Yeah,
to
yeah,
where that's
no,
true.
there's
But
no
nope, it's true.
guardrails, no
Wow.
guardrails. Trying to get
Wow.
them young, you know?
Well,
Um, but, yeah, I mean, y'all have survived okay, you know, I think, gotten some right, some wrong. I forget the score. I'm a terrible, terrible, game host. I've forgotten the score, but I have one more if we wanted to do like a tie break.
let's do a
Let's
tiebreak.
Okay.
do it.
So this is for both of you. Truth or
Okay.
troll? Spotify has an AI music problem, but bots love it. Fake listeners are flocking to AI made songs on streaming platforms.
True.
I'm going true too.
You are both correct. It is like a circle jerk of fake engagement. So that's end of culture right there.
I made a AI song about my dog because you can like type in things about your animal and then it'll just like generate. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's really cute. That's really cute. I love
If you want to use artificial intelligence for good,
in a
that's it.
heartfelt way. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to do that for my cat. So
All right, Sydney, I believe got what detoxer speaking now, right?
Yeah. So now that we've kind of like gotten more out into the world, we have received some feedback from detoxers. So we just wanted to go through some of them. At Paolacine writes, very interesting conversation. I ordered the book and can't wait to dive into it. I'm definitely one of those people who just clicks accept it all without thinking too much about it. So this really got me reflecting. This book is making more people aware of how ads work, but I'm wondering, is it necessarily a bad thing if predictive ads are helpful? As long as we understand what's going on behind the scenes, would love to hear what Alessandra and Nolan think about that. I love that. I love this idea of like, is it helpful anyway? I also kind of have these like moments of, oh well, isn't that bad? But I keep coming back to this. So I'm happy that like people are thinking about this a lot. And then one more for Dot
Well, I can.
Murphy. Yeah,
I
go
was going
ahead.
to say, just for clarification, that was Ali De Lorenzo, who I was interviewing. That's what this comments in reference to. And Ali De Lorenzo wrote a book called um, Adjust. And yeah, I would say that in terms of the comment. I'm blanking on the user's name. I apologize. Um, this idea of whether or not it's necessarily a bad thing for predictive, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's all about who has the power. That's always the question to me. It's like when people say, "I've got nothing to hide," or I want to get rid of hate speech online or whatever. In both cases, I'm like, okay, great, but who do you trust to do that for you? Like, who do you
Mm.
trust to hand truth over to as they get rid of hate speech? Or if you have nothing to hide, who do you trust to see everything about you? That's the power question. So I think, to their point, no, predictive isn't bad. I mean, we like predictive tools. Like, we like to predict weather, right? We'd like to ideally predict things like school shooters and things like that, I'm sure. But there's a cost there, and there's a power question. And so I think that's what the kind of media literacy lesson is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our last one for today, Dot Murphy 7279 said, many of people's attention span is so short that they don't hear everything. Too many people don't know the meaning of 4-syllable words. I have seen too many articles in my local newspaper that wound up being incorrect because of bungled sentence structure. Sometimes they were incorrect because road numbers or street names that were not where the writer claimed that they were. Yeah, that one's interesting too.
Yeah, what do you make of that, Sydney? Because I mean, this is open to both of you, but Sydney in particular, because like I thinking of it like faculty colleagues, like when I
Mm.
was a young student and now when I'm an older instructor, I still hear instructors saying like, I don't know, pining for like the good old days when students were supposedly like reading Shakespeare and sitting around having deep debates. I don't know. What do you make of that? This kind of like historical bias or presentism bias?
Oh, like everybody kind of wants like the old school, like I don't know. I really struggle with this a lot too when it comes to AI because everyone has this chip on their shoulder of like, we should just go back to. I have a lot of people who I've been talking to who are going back to using blue books, which, if nobody remembers, is like how we used to test students is that we would make them handwrite essays in class. So there was no way to cheat, which theoretically, sure, you could do. But the whole point of writing is that you can edit. And I find that to be a distinguishing factor of writing outside of communication and outside of talking is being able to edit and actually go in and do research and actually look up facts or information. I find that to be like the most distinguishing factor of writing. And so to have people sitting in a classroom and using blue books is a little frustrating. So I see that in terms of the AI argument too, where it's like, oh, I wish we could just go like back to the good old days. But I do feel like in so many ways, like we do need to adjust to where students are at now and give them those tool sets. Yes, there are ways in which they need to have foundational skills. And I think that is the most difficult part about being a teacher right now is you almost feel like you have two jobs. The first is to get foundational skills down and the second is to teach them applicable skills, and I feel like that can be frustrating, but as a teacher I do think it's important to be mindful of that, and it's our job to be able to kind of do both right now. I think that's just kind of the unfortunate state of where things are, and I do think a lot about the ways in which, for example, like bigger corporations could be able to like have more regulations around AI that would be helping us with that. There are a lot of ways that bigger corporations and media could be helping, but right now I feel like that responsibility falls on the teacher a lot.
Yeah, interesting. On the blue book front, I don't know where you stand on this, but like I agree with you on the writing point of it. But I do think one utilization of blue books. There's like a long debate here, by the way, why we got rid of blue books. There was like this push to do like smaller assignments, which I don't think is necessarily that bad. But I always think in our current environment, especially the last 50 years of neoliberalism, we conflate passing with learning. So they'll point to the data and say like, look, students are
Mm.
doing better. It's like, yeah, but are they learning or passing? I do think one of the things about blue books, at least why some other instructors are using it besides teaching writing, is content knowledge. You talk about meeting
Mm.
students where they're at. One of the concerns I think students have, and maybe this is old fogey. I mean, maybe this will turn out to be wrong, but I think they are increasingly trusting the ability to instantly search information as a replacement for having content knowledge. And I think the blue
Mm.
books are a way to test in class, like what content knowledge you have. Not always, right? You have to write an example, which I think is right. I don't know. So what do you think of what do you think of that pushback or fight there? One, do you think it even exists? But two, what do you think about that?
I think I think what's really important is rooting ourselves like back down into the media literacy like skill set that we use in this podcast is things like how do we discern the knowledge that we're finding online? Like I think like not only seeing knowledge online, but then also having the ability to discern between like what is misinformation, what's disinformation, what are some of the things that I see as red flags or markers. I think those kinds of skill sets are what I look for in students more so than content knowledge. Like I want them to have like critical thinking skills. I think I like put over everything else. But that's just I think that like different teachers have different like values. And I think for me like that critical thinking component is like at the very top of my tier. And then it like kind of goes down from there. But I think that's maybe how I feel.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys keep sending your comments. We'll keep letting the detoxers speak. This is a cool segment, and I believe it's sidebar time.
Yeah, we can get into the sidebar where we take a sharp left turn into something weird or wild or worrying. And this week, I want to just talk about facts. I've been thinking a lot about facts. So you've heard the phrase, just give me the facts. And it sounds simple and straightforward and a shortcut to the truth. But a fact isn't something just floating in the air waiting to be discovered. Facts are constructed by people using very specific tools, guided by particular assumptions. And so people decide what counts as the evidence and which questions get asked and what methods are considered legitimate. And I think that's why facts should open up inquiry, not shut it down. Unfortunately, more and more they can be used to end debate. There are phrases like the science is settled or facts speak for themselves, and they're sort of acting like rhetorical shields as if these facts exist outside the conditions that shaped them and the choices. And those choices often reflect the priorities of whoever has the most power or resources. And this doesn't make facts false, but it does mean that they're not entirely neutral. And when we treat facts as self evident or beyond questioning, we risk building knowledge on a fragile foundation, which sooner or later people can notice the cracks in. And when that happens, even good facts can lose their force because they start to feel less like tools for understanding and more like instruments of control or ways to enforce consensus. And I want to just take us back to the early days of COVID really quick. The lab leak hypothesis was dismissed almost immediately and labeled a conspiracy theory, not because science was settled, but because it was politically convenient to do so. And the mainstream media quickly declared the case closed. It sidelined broader range of perspectives. Even credentialed scientists offering some critiques were dismissed. And then eventually the narrative began to shift a bit, and even US intelligence agencies admitted that a lab origin couldn't be totally ruled out. And so the problem with that COVID story isn't that the story changed. It's just that, like, I think science and journalism are supposed to work like that. But what is I found concerning is how forcefully the certainty was imposed, and that even asking questions was dangerous. Instead of saying, "Here's what we know, here's what we don't know," this is why this explanation seems less likely. The message was very clear that anything outside the mainstream was misinformation and it was a threat. But it wasn't necessarily misinformation, and I think pretending it was eroded some trust. And once in any situation, once trust is broken, it's very hard to get back. So I think that the COVID story is just one of many warnings about what happens when we present constructed facts as settled truth. And when people see the certainty crumbling, they don't just lose faith in the particular fact, they start thinking, well, if the powers that be were so confident about something so uncertain, what else should we be questioning? And from there, it could be a short leap to, well, maybe all facts are just opinions in disguise, and maybe truth is whatever the powerful want us to believe. And I think that's the deeper crisis we're facing, not just misinformation, but a growing belief that no one is really telling the truth, just selling an agenda. And we've, in response to this, there's been a wave of media literacy tools, the fact checkers and the credibility scores and browser extensions. All are claiming to rebuild trust in public information, but by guiding users to reliable sources. But shout out to Nolan, who wrote this article. Has media literacy been hijacked? And in that article, Nolan points out that some of these tools don't necessarily foster critical thinking. They are perhaps reinforcing some institutional loyalty and not necessarily teaching people to question power, just training them to trust it. For example, NewsGuard. We've covered NewsGuard on the show before. To remind you, it's funded by corporations and advised by intelligence-linked firms. It's installed in public schools as a gatekeeper of trusted news. And I think that this kind of reveals a deeper problem, that fact checkers often are just drawing from the same networks and institutional pipelines that shape the original narratives. So when we declare something as false, when they declare something as false, they're just reinforcing who gets to be believed. And this isn't to say that every fact check is wrong. I think it means that we need to stay curious about the judgments that are being made and who gets to make them. Fact checking ought to be a way to interrogate authority rather than just building trust. That's why the real work isn't just pointing people to the right sources. It's cultivating habits of discernment, and media literacy invites us to see not just what is said to be true, but how truth is constructed, by whom, and for what purpose. It's the practice of treating facts as evolving claims and examining how they're made. And it's teaching us to get comfortable with saying, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's how we might learn more. So good facts should never be conversation enders. They should be conversation starters. So that's your sidebar segment for today. And stay curious. Until next time.
Gosh, thank you, Dickey. And I think that's a great reminder. And it's interesting you brought up COVID. I think there's a lot of reckoning that needs to happen with COVID era reporting, and I think a lot of people are uncomfortable about it because so many of them kind of went online to try and what's the word? They went online to kind of defend themselves or stake out a position that since has been questioned, and so a lot of people I think just want to put COVID in the rearview mirror. But I glad that you used that as an example. I think there's a lot there for the COVID era for sure.
Yeah. There's definitely some. I think in hindsight, we can learn a lot of lessons for the future because it's there might be. I'm sure there'll be other pandemics, just the world we live in. And it is still kind of controversial. I was a little shy to bring it up, but I just the rush to judgment. Like I'm okay with failing. With I think failing isn't always bad. And what I mean by failing is getting it wrong. But when we have a process of accountability and discernment, and we can fail better, we can improve our understandings because so I just think that's one of the lessons I would love to learn more
Good,
about.
excellent. And that piece I wrote on hijacking media literacy from 2022 with, I think it was with Ben Boynton, was we just started that, but Sydney and I did a kind of updated version looking at NATO recently, which also had NewsGuard in there. So if folks are interested in that topic, highly recommend check that out. It's on projectcenter.org's dispatches. You can get it there as well.
Oh, yeah.
I want to thank Dickey. I want to thank Sydney Sullivan. I want to thank all of you detoxers for tuning in. We are the Media Literacy Wrecking Crew. We do this every week. Thank you very much. See you next week and keep detoxing.
Hey detoxers, this is the Disinfo Detox. If you believe in media literacy for all, help us keep going. Become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/disinfodetox. There's also plenty of free ways to support. You can comment, follow, or share. Every little bit helps. Thanks for supporting the Disinfo Detox, where media literacy meets breaking news.